So Jackie Poole is an occupational therapist and has specialized in dementia for over 35 years, working in health and social care in hospitals, care homes, and with people at home. In addition to being the developer of the QCS PAL instrument, she is also the author of the book From Dementia to Rementia. Jackie is a regular speaker at conferences and a researcher with the University of Exeter. She's also a trustee with the National Activity Providers Network and a strong believer in the importance of engagement and meaningful activity to promote well-being for all. Her role as the Dementia Care Champion for QCS Quality Compliance Systems and also as a visiting lecturer to postgraduate students at the University of Winchester supports her ongoing passion for learning and sharing knowledge to support those who are living with dementia. So Jackie's going to tell us what's new in dementia care.
First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to attend your conference. And so obviously it looks like it's a full and exciting couple of days. As Kim said, I'm going to be talking about some elements about what's new in dementia care. And it's very exciting times. There's a lot happening very quickly, it seems, at the moment. And so this is probably some of what's happening and probably not all of it. The first thing I'd like to talk through, really, I'm going to cover three main areas. What's happening in terms of the research and particularly the medical research and what's happening with the current medications. I want to talk to you about cognitive rehabilitation, which, as Kim said in the introduction there, something that I'm very involved in with the University of Exeter. And then I'm going to finish by talking about what's available, and hopefully you'll have pens at the ready, but I think these slides will be shared with you afterwards because I'm going to provide you with several URL links to free, which is always a beautiful word, free resources that will help you to provide really individualised care and support to people living with dementia. So if I start off with the what's happening in terms of research, and we've come quite far pretty fast, really, and this is obviously looking at the UK, and we established the UK Dementia Research Institute in 2017, and that was 8 sites around the UK with a central hub at University College of London. And then in February this year, the UK Dementia Research Institute published this document that you can see on the screen here. So do go and take a look at it if you want to look at it in more detail. And it's full of all the latest discoveries, and as it says on the subtitle on the document, to give new hope about stopping dementia. And in line with publishing the document, the Institute's value really was recognised of what it had been up to in the past 5 years by a panel of international colleagues, experts and peers. And so the Medical Research Council committed a further £131 million as part of a collective commitment, as more money was put in by the Alzheimer's Society and Alzheimer's Research UK. And we've got a total of £150 million for the next 5 years. So that's really promising. And we've now got to the situation where we've got about 800 plus researchers working on different aspects of research. So what you've got on this slide is some of the areas that are being researched by this particular UK Dementia Research Institute. And as you can see from this, I'm not going to go through them all, you'll be pleased to hear, because I think we'd be blinded by science, but they are all particularly looking at, as it says here really in the subtitle of the document, looking at how we can stop dementia, stop the conditions that are causing dementia by really understanding their onset, understanding their causes, understanding their risk factors. So it's a very biomedical approach to understanding dementia. And the interesting thing from this, of course, is that already we're seeing the results of some of that with some of the new tests that are around. So we've got now the blood tests, which are helpful to not to diagnose dementia, but to at least screen for it. They're not subtle enough, I suppose, and specific enough. When you think about it, the blood's full of lots of other information and messages. So if there are certain elements in there that indicate the potential of some of the conditions such as Alzheimer's disease, then that's a screening matter then for referring on for the more comprehensive scans and PET scans and cerebrospinal fluid tests. But it's a huge step forward to be able to do that. What we've also got very new is an intranasal vaccine, which is particularly for activating and alerting the immune system. And so there's two very recent, the latest one. So we started off actually with a med called aducanumab, which a friend who lives with dementia actually called the abracadabra drug, which probably is a good way of describing it. And we've now got, actually that's sort of fell a little bit by the wayside, and the latest ones are lecanemab and even more recently donanemab. So both of these two are disease-modifying immunotherapy drugs. They are delivered by infusion, which of course is a story in its own right, because not everybody is going to be able to perhaps tolerate that. It means it's very expensive to administer as well, and needs frequent administrations. But it works with the immune system, and it's all targeting the toxic amyloid proteins build up, so the plaques. And very many of you on this call will be familiar with the fact that Alzheimer's disease pathology is very much around the plaques and tangles in the brain. And what this is looking at is the plaques and removing the plaques, particularly from the brains of people living with early stage Alzheimer's disease. So these are not meds that are appropriate for everybody, of course, when you understand that. But they are helpful to some. And lecanemab was approved first over in the US in January, and now can be given to people in the USA. And donanemab is following the same course. The application now is going through to the European Medicines Agency for approval in the EU, and decision on that is expected sometime in the first half of 2024. So those of you who are still in the EU will benefit if that is actually given the go-ahead, more than we would in the UK, because what we've got to have happen in the UK is it's also got to be approved by the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. And that agency will still follow the decisions made by the European Commission until January 2024. So we've got a little bit of a window where we might be able to take advantage of that, because there's a sort of an overlap there between when it's actually being considered by the European agency. But also in the UK, we need it to be approved by the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, NICE. And what they do, of course, is not just look at the benefits and the risks, but they also take into account how cost effective the treatment is. So I don't know yet, in all honesty, where that's going to lead us and leave us, but it's whatever, it's a massive step forward, and there are 117 other drugs currently being tested. So, it's a step in the right direction, and you can see how we're heading in the right direction. So what does the research show with these two meds? Well, lecanemab slowed down the speed at which memory and thinking worsened by 27% in people taking the drug compared to people who were on the placebo one. Now, what happened with donanemab, the more recent one, the same results, but even better, the progression was slowed by 36%. And more importantly, I think, is that the donanemab showed that 40% less decline in the ability to carry out activities of daily living. So there's one thing, having an impact on how quickly the condition progresses. And of course, that's important. But there's also the other thing about what those symptoms stop you from being able to do. And if you can actually at least be, still be able to function despite those symptoms, then I think that is particularly important. So that's a very brief overview, really, of what's happening in the medications world. And I haven't been fortunate enough to attend the whole conference, and you've maybe already covered some of that already in these presentations. So forgive me if that's the case. What I want to move us into is looking at the therapeutic interventions that are recommended in the most recent NICE guidelines. So these are the recommendations for interventions that are across the board, really, for all people living with dementia, not necessarily those only with Alzheimer's disease and only in the earlier stages. And these are the non-pharmacological approaches as well. So I think that gives us a lot of hope. Those of us who can't access the meds yet, who perhaps the meds aren't appropriate for in any case, these are interventions that we could be and should be actually offering now. So there are only 4 that are actually recommended. The first one, as you can see, is offering a range of activities that promote well-being that are tailored to the person's preferences. And I would add to that the caveat also of abilities as well. So breaking down activities so that they are able to engage in them. And funnily enough, just this morning, I've been writing a submission for another Congress, the UK Congress, Dementia Congress in November, about the importance of occupational justice and the incidences of occupational injustice when people with dementia aren't offered that range of activities at the level that they can engage in them. Another recommendation is about offering group cognitive stimulation therapy, and that's for people, particularly beneficial for people living with mild to moderate dementia. And many of you probably are very familiar with CST, cognitive stimulation therapy. And if you're not, then do look it up. And of course, as it says there, it's a group approach. So you get a group of people together with mild to moderate dementia, and it's a kind of a closed group, follows a particular routine. And what it does really is stimulate individuals to give the whole brain a good workout. So it uses creative activity, it uses social activity, it uses some intellectual activity as well. So it's like a gym for the brain. It also recommends in the NICE guidelines to consider group reminiscence therapy. And of course, reminiscence therapy is particularly valuable to help people to maintain their sense of self and therefore well-being, to be able to celebrate past experiences, and by bringing those back to mind, being able to probably still have some role fulfillment and have a sense of citizenship within the group as well. And the last recommendation on there is about considering cognitive rehabilitation or occupational therapy to support functional ability. Now, that 4th recommendation was quite late in coming, and in fact the NICE organisation slightly delayed the production of these guidelines, waiting for the results of the study that I was involved in to determine the reliability and validity of cognitive rehabilitation. And as an occupational therapist myself, I'm obviously delighted to see that they included the actual occupational therapy in here too. But cognitive rehabilitation isn't something that can only be delivered by occupational therapists, and that's particularly what I wanted to talk through with you on this presentation. Now, as well as the NICE guidelines, what we also have is, and I've been involved in this, is the World Health Organization is developing a whole package of rehabilitation interventions across the board of all conditions. And I've been honoured really to have been able to participate in a work stream for the World Health Organization's package of rehab interventions for people with dementia. So even World Health Organization, and specifically World Health Organization, is recognizing that people with dementia can benefit from rehabilitation. And that might, to many of you, hopefully that you might be thinking, well, yes, of course. But back in the day when I first started as a lowly, starting off occupational therapy student, and even before that as an OT support worker, actually, I saw that people who lived with dementia, who were in the hospitals, on the wards, in their beds, were bypassed by the rehab services because they'd got dementia, and it was deemed that they couldn't benefit. And I've been fighting probably for about 40 years to change this. So to get to this stage now is quite incredible, really. So hopefully I'm giving you time to have a little look at what's on this slide. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development has a goal in it, and it's all about healthy lives for all, and it's about equity, of course, within that. And it's looking for a universal health coverage strategic priority, which means that all people receive quality health services, meet their needs, and without being exposed to financial hardship in the paying of the services. So rehab is actually among the services included in this universal health coverage. And as part of the World Health Organization's Rehab 2030 call for action, these packages of rehabilitation interventions have been developed. And the whole point of them is to support at government level the ministries of health in planning, budgeting and integrating rehabilitation interventions into their health and social care, I would say, systems. So that's really positive and promising. So the trial that I was involved in, we called GREAT, because we love a mnemonic, and GREAT is a mnemonic very loosely fitted around the words goal-oriented, that's what the G stands for, cognitive rehabilitation, there's your R, for early Alzheimer's, that's the EA trial. But actually, the early Alzheimer's then in the full sentence of the descriptor had, and other forms of dementia, so it wasn't just about Alzheimer's disease. And we carried out a whole series of different studies over the last several years now, probably around 15 to 20 years. So it began with a few small case studies, and they were actually at the University of Bangor in North Wales. And that led it then to a pilot trial, which was funded by the Alzheimer's Society with just a few individuals in North Wales. And then into the larger GREAT trial, which we had 475 people with dementia participating. And those people, it was a randomized control trial. So half of that group received GREAT cognitive rehabilitation, which I'll explain in a moment exactly what that was. And the other half received treatment as usual. And what you can see on here is the outcome of those interventions. So you've got the treatment as usual set of data graphic on the right-hand side of the slide, and the cognitive rehab data on the left-hand side. And what we actually measured to see if it was effective was what the person's goal was and what the rating of that goal was, and then what the achievement rating of that goal was at so we got it at baseline, then at 3 months after they'd had 12 once a week interventions. And then we went on to do a further maintenance period once a month, further continuing next 6 months, so over a 9-month period. So what you're seeing here in the blue bars is where people were at their baseline in terms of their goal achievement ratings. And then the orange bar shows, first of all, both the people with dementia, and then next to them what their care partner also measured in terms of how they, well, as you can see, they improved. And also then the ongoing, what happened after 9 months. And what you can see, I mean, obviously there's a slight difference between the opinion of the carers and the opinion of the participants. But what you can clearly see is an improvement, significant improvement for those receiving cognitive rehab, and some improvement for those receiving treatment as usual. And what was also really important, I think, to note is that that improvement was maintained. Now, the improvement for the people with treatment as usual was interesting. And of course, they were receiving other treatments, so other treatments were probably having some impact too. But in this great trial, the research assistants were the ones who went out there and recruited the entire 475 population that participated. And part of that recruitment was to ask people at that point to identify what their goals would be. And then those individuals were randomly selected, and the research therapists were then provided with the information. And I think also what we all felt was happening was that even in the treatment as usual, because people had been given that kind of sense of hope, really, about thinking about, well, I could have a goal and I could have a go at this. Some people we know went on to tackle the goal they had identified, even though they weren't getting the cognitive rehab. And so they were able to improve, even if it wasn't as much as with the actual cognitive rehabilitation program and the specific techniques that were used. So that was, incredibly heartening. And what we published the paper in the early 2010s, and then went on to do a further trial, which we called Great into Practice. So the GREAT trial was funded by the NIHR, the National Institute for Health Research, and then the further trial, Great into Practice, was again funded by Alzheimer's Society. The GREAT trial was a 5-year programme, and then the Great into Practice was a further 3 years. And the Great into Practice trial was really important because the first trial was using rehab therapists who were research based. And what we wanted to do, now we'd proven that it was effective, what we wanted to do was see if it could be delivered in real-time care. So the Great into Practice study went on to deliver the same programme, but over a shorter period of time. And we taught, or I did, so my role was to develop the training programme, to teach the CR practitioners and then to supervise them. And in the Great into Practice programme, we were teaching mainly occupational therapists, I would say, but not all, who were working in community reablement teams, in hospital care settings, and some in care homes as well. And in fact, I was working with a group of care homes at the time, and we recruited a couple of half-time OTs into the care homes to see what happened there. But I also taught and supported the activity coordinators and some senior carers to also be able to deliver cognitive rehab. And that worked effectively too. So what's cognitive rehab then? So, of course, it begins with this goal, and the goal is a SMART goal, so specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and within a time frame. And it was obviously needed to be important to the person because it was about motivating that individual. And they rated where they were in terms of achieving that goal at the start, and then they were asked to rate it again at the end. And we used what's called the Bangor goal setting interview, which you can download from the University of Exeter's site. And then we used a collaborative problem-solving approach, really, to looking at what were the cognitive impairments that were getting in the way of carrying out these functions, these goals, and what else might have been getting in the way, such as relationships, were they supportive or undermining, for example, and any other issues, perhaps some mental health issues and anxiety, for example. So the types of rehab methods that we use were both new learning and relearning of both information, so it could be information that had been lost or new information that had not been learned in the first place, but also actions and activities that the ability to do them had been lost, or it was something new that the person wanted to learn. We also did use some compensatory approaches, so helping people to learn to use post-it notes and whiteboards to write information on, and calendars and so on, but that wasn't the first line. We were looking really to help people to really create new nerve connections in place of the damaged ones through repetition and practice using very specific techniques for the learning approaches. And of course, we were using some assistive technology and other behavioural approaches that you can see on here. And we were supporting the person to carry out that plan and then monitoring progress as they went. So I'm not going to say too much more about great cognitive rehabilitation because I'm just keeping an eye on the time, and I know I've got lots more to tell you. But the beautiful thing is that what we did, and of course COVID helped us with this in a way, although it wasn't great during the course of this, but the course originally that we developed was a face-to-face course. And then as COVID came through us, we, with the Great Into Practice trial, we needed to adapt that. So we made it an online course, face-to-face online course for those practitioners. But then what we did was teamed up with the I'm losing my words, trying to think who it was. It was the Scotland Health Service Education System with the University of Exeter, and we turned this training course into an online course. Now, there's two ways that you can access this online course, and both of them are free for you to do. So you've got the two links there. The first one is actually the NHS link, which takes you into the e-learning hub. And that can be accessed by anybody with an NHS or university email address. And I suspect some of you on this call might not have that. But the good news is you can also use the other link, and it will take you straight to exactly the same course, but it's sitting on the University of Exeter's website. The only difference is that it's not got all the bells and whistles of the learning management programme that the NHS Learning Hub has. So that means that it's quite a long course, and if you go into it and then need to have a break, if you turn it off and come back, you will have kind of lost your place, and you just need to scroll through to where you'd last left off. So little tip, make a note of where you are so that you can go back to that. And the other thing is it doesn't provide you with a certificate at the end, but of course you or make a note of your own CPD learning and the hours of learning that you've done. And if you're part of an organisation, there's no reason why you can't create your own certificates of achievement when you've completed the course. But it will lead you through all the specific rehab techniques for learning and relearning information and actions. So what we also did, and please do go to the Alzheimer's Society to download this booklet, which is another freebie, and it's full of self-help materials. So the team at the University of Exeter worked with some of the ambassadors from the Alzheimer's Society to develop this online booklet that takes you through how to set goals, and there's lots of little videos in there which will help with that, and a message about Great CR from people who are living with dementia as well. So it's a written guide and a workbook as well, lots of tips and ideas, stories, quotes and examples. And at the end of it, for people who are living with dementia, there's a workbook for them to help them to set their own goals. So if you are somebody living with dementia, you can use this yourself. If you're a care partner or a care service provider, you could download this and support others who are living with dementia to use it. Now, Kim mentioned my book From Dementia to Rementia, and this is a guide to personal rehabilitation strategies, and a large portion of it looks at cognition and cognitive rehabilitation in terms of those kinds of techniques. But it also does look at the importance of good nutrition and hydration, the importance of oral health, the importance of emotion, and how I'm sure many of you understand this, how strong emotions have an impact on thinking and judgment and reasoning, how sleep can get in the way of good thinking, but also actually how important sleep is to good brain health, because it's in deep sleep that we trigger the system which helps us to cleanse the brain from any toxins. So there's a lot in there which hopefully you might be interested in. If it's a Jessica Kingsley published book. But the reason I'm particularly talking about it is because I'm not really trying to sell the book to you. Obviously, if you want to get it, that'd be lovely, but that's not the point. You won't be surprised to hear that there's a big portion in there that takes us through the PAL instrument, which is a tool that I developed back in the 90s now, which became a reliable and valid tool in 2008, and is now translated into lots of different languages and used all around the world. In a couple of years ago, the PAL instrument was acquired by QCS Quality Compliance Systems, and this slide tells you just briefly really an overview of what the PAL is if you've not heard of it. But what QCS have done with it is developed it into an electronic system. So it's available in a book, again published by Jessica Kingsley, in its kind of basic paper format. And when you get the book, all the pages have got little ticks on the top right-hand corner. You can photocopy and use as often as you like. You've got those permissions. But if you go, again, if you look at the bottom of this screen to that URL, you can download the electronic version for free. I'm delighted that QCS has made that available. What you do is complete the checklist on an individual. You've got 9 domains, 9 kind of little areas to think about how the person usually carries out everyday actions. It's based on developmental theory, and by completing its all 9 domains, what you then automatically get then is an understanding of one of these 4 levels of ability that the person is at. And it then automatically produces a guide to enable caregivers to know how to support the person to do those personal, domestic and leisure activities. So it's all very well having a care plan that says what you're meant to be doing to support somebody. It's the how that is often the difficulty. And going back to what I was saying about occupational justice, it's so important to enable people at all levels of dementia to be able to engage at the level that they can. And that's what the PAL helps you to do. So the QCS PAL instrument, as I said, it's available as a free to download tool. And they have gone on, though, to create a technology platform using PAL, where it will have all these reporting functions as well. And that's a subscription-based service. And if you're interested in that, if you download the free PAL instrument, you'll get an automated contact, I'm sure, inviting you to have a look at the full system, the Dementia Centre. So being able to actually pull up reports and see how the person has fared over a period of time, to see how your group of people are faring, can have many benefits. Obviously, it's going to be good for evaluating your service. It can also be good for helping if you've got, for example, a care home service or home care for that matter, thinking about how you actually deploy your staff. If you've discovered that you've got lots of people that have been identified at a particular level of ability when dining, for example, that will help to guide you about where you need your staff and how many staff you need. Do you need more people to go into people's own rooms, or do you need people seated at the table to help support somebody to dine, a group of people to dine, or can people kind of crack on their own with their meal as long as they're given some prompts? So there's a lot in the Dementia Centre, and here you can see just a snapshot of those. And I don't want you to feel like I'm kind of pushing this at you, so I'm not going to say too much about it. There's more being developed. You can see there the learning management tools are coming next, but there's a lot around the PAL. The PAL is kind of like the heart of it, the scaffolding then that everything else hangs on to. And in it, there's lots of additional information. There's some webinars that I've recorded for everybody in there. There's a lot in the library as well, with access to, signposting people to books that then obviously they would need to go and buy, but then lots of films and research articles that are free to access, with discussion points for helping with learning from those research articles, in order to think about what can I do from this in my own care service, in my own setting, to help the people that I'm supporting. And you'll see on there that in the left-hand side middle box, the blue one, it says PAL engagement measure, and that's another new kid on the block in terms of PAL. And whereas PAL is a cognitive assessment in its own right, the QCS PAL engagement measure doesn't look only at cognition, but it measures and evidences meaningful engagement across these 4 areas that you can see here. So physical, social, emotional, and cognitive. And it does that by looking at some simple areas for each one to demonstrate how the person is faring. And we validated this particular tool very recently, and the information about it is in the 5th edition of the PAL book. And so what we found is it is sensitive to change, and it can illustrate an improvement or a change if there's a deterioration in engagement. But what we were seeing was that the improvement was aligned with the behaviours relating to engagement with other people, physical dexterity, emotional interaction as well. And as you can see, it's a simple spreadsheet approach, which I think QCS, it's kind of a bit below their usual tech levels. But for now that we've got this, and I'm sure they'll be developing it into something more whiz-bang in the future. But it works by recording 0, 1 or 2, depending on how frequently these types of engagement are observed. And you complete a column while you observe a specific individual in a specific activity. So say it was at the dining table, you would complete measure 1 and put your recordings in, and then maybe a week later, when you've realised where the person is perhaps struggling a little bit and put in some interventions, you would repeat your measure again. And your measures give a percentage outcome, but they also give a colour coded outcome as well, so that you can see how a person has changed over time. So it becomes a lovely snapshot that you can use with family members when they're saying, I don't think mum's doing a great deal. You can actually evidence that. It's really heartening, I think, for your workforce well-being to see the impact, the positive impact that they're having as well. But mainly, of course, it's all about the people who are living with dementia and the impact that would have on them when you've got that hopefulness and that expectation that people can improve with the right kinds of approaches. So that's the final link for you on there, which will take you to Dementia Centre itself. And that's the end of my presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if anybody's got any questions. Thank you, Kim.
Thanks for that. That was really practical and lots of ideas and tips for people to use and links to things. We have one question that's come in. Do you think that the emergence of new drug therapies is the most promising treatment option, or are there other approaches that are or should be explored?
Oh, yes. Well, I think obviously I suspect, the treatments is one thing, but the prevention is the holy grail, isn't it? And of course the Dementia Research Institute is looking for prevention, and the earlier the diagnosis, the earlier the detection of the early signs, the better we will get at that. And understanding the genetics, for example, as well, will be a part of that. But meanwhile, I'm very concerned, of course, for people who are living with dementia now, and the meds we've got will only support a very limited number of people, if we even get them into this country. So that's why I've spent a lot of time on this presentation talking about cognitive rehabilitation, because I think that is a game changer too.
Very good. Wonderful. Well, lots of lovely comments coming in. So thank you so much for that, Jackie. And we'll be sharing that after the conference.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.